In the last video, we covered different types of operators, but now in this one, it's getting excited. This is where the fun stuff happens. We're going to be covering conditional statements. This includes if statements and switches. Okay, welcome to your next Python tutorial. In today's tutorial, we're going to be covering if statements and how we're going to implement switches within Python. There's a little trick for you. Okay, so let's move on to our little tutorial here in the presentation. So we're still in the introduction phase. So overview, if statements and switches. So a conditional statement in mathematics is an if-then where there's a hypothesis and a conclusion. There's a logical operator in there that is denoted by a symbol, but whether or not it's true or false, we're going to have a result. So just quickly think back to the last lesson when we covered operators. Well, we're going to be using some of those operators in our conditionals. That's exactly what they're meant for. So here's an example of the syntax. This is the example we're using in the tutorial as well. What we're going to do is we're going to have an if x is whatever the symbol is, in relation to y, print a message. So that's what we're going to do now. We're going to type the code and then I'll explain it. We're going to get an error from all the spaces, but this is what we're doing. Now, we don't have to do it this way. It can be used for many other things. I'm just doing it this way for ease of learning. We're going to cover a couple more advanced ways of handling this later on. Along with having our own input. So we're going to pull input from the console, and then we're going to create results, like maybe a banking thing or random number, like pick a number between 1 and 10 type deal. Okay, so now let's run this and just show you the results. No errors. Woot! Result. So now, when we change the values and run it again, we're going to get different output. Now let's change it again. There we go. So that's it working. Let's break it down into parts. Go back to our presentation and see what's going on here. So the first thing we did was we declared the variables. We have our integers in this case, and then we have a couple strings. Strings are our messages. Our x and y variables are our input variables. And then we got the word if. So we're saying if, in this case, x is greater than y, do this. And the do this in this case is we're using the print function to print to the console. Moving on further, we're saying wait, but we want something more to happen here. What about if else something else is occurring? Let me just back up a bit. And then we have another if, another message, another else, and so on. But this gets annoying because you just keep on indenting and indenting further and further until you're off the page and you're like, I don't know what to do. So now we're going to shorten it up a little bit. And I'm actually going to modify the code right in front of you just to make it a little bit more relevant. So let's go to doing work. So all we're going to do is we're actually just going to add the if up here, delete all this junk, and do it again. A little bit more housekeeping over here. Now let's try running the code. Let's go down to the result. There we go. We're going to get the same result, it just is easier to read. Now the next thing we want to cover is we want to cover switches. But first, take some time and practice a little bit. Just try different variables, try stringing variables together, and seeing what you get. Now we're going to move on to the next little bit. So we're going to do a switch case, but because Python doesn't natively do switches, we're actually going to create our own switch by using a function. I know, it's crazy, haven't taught you functions yet. Well, this is how you're going to learn. So let's move on over to our presentation just to give a brief overview. Now, think back to the old days, whenever we had an operator inside a room receiving calls and connecting people to other people. Well, that was a switchboard that they were operating. In code, we can create similar things. We call them switch cases. So in this case, we're going to do this. In this case, we're going to do this based off of input, or kind of like a light switch. Hey, when the light switch is on, we got power going to the light or the fan. When the light switch is off, we don't have power going to it. That's all we're doing in the code. And here's our example. Now you can see we define a function called switch. In that function, we're going to take in variables called args, or arguments. And then we're going to create a dictionary. In that dictionary, we're going to have numerical values assigned to strings. These strings are our outputs. And then at the end of it, we're going to print it. So let's go to doing work. Whoops. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. I can't type. Sunday. There we go. We got our days. Whoops. I clicked shift twice and it brought up that screen. News to me. So now we're going to print cases dot get args, and then the day is a lie. If we get the wrong date, next thing we're going to do is we're going to switch. We're going to call switch with day number 5. Then we're going to run our code. Let's see what happens. Oh no, I messed up somewhere. Where did I forgot the colon. Just remember that should not be included in the function. There we go. So what is the 5th day? Friday. Let's try changing this to day number 7. What do we get? Sunday. Okay. So now I know you may or may not be able to see the value in this, but I use switches all the time. I use them in C++, I use them in PHP, JavaScript. I love my switches. Reason being because I find them in a lot of cases. They are way more cleaner than us using if, then, else if statements all the time. Stringing them together just gets annoying. Also, whenever I'm dealing with arrays of things or I'm breaking apart JSON objects, I like to use my switches. I'm just a switch fanatic. Some people call me crazy because of it. I don't know. I think they're cleaner. And I like using if statements when ifs are required. I use switches when switches are required. It all depends on the context of your code. So if you see something written with a boatload of switches in it, chances are I got my hands on it and I did it myself. But now we're going to move back over to the presentation where we're breaking this down into pieces. So here's our explanation. We're going to define a function. That function contains a variable, that variable being arguments. We then create our dictionary calling it cases. Why is it called cases? Because we got a bunch of cases in this switch. Cases being days, Monday to Sunday, based off of the relevant variable of 1 to 7. If you're creating a calendar application, it might come in handy. Like I said, we index them. Next, we display our results. Now, there are multiple ways we can do so. In this case, we're just displaying it within the function. Other ways we can do it, we can return it as a function variable. Now try it out. Try it with many different things. Take your time, learn it. I'll upload this PowerPoint presentation to the Discord server, as well as a video will be uploaded. Now, in conclusion, we covered our if statements. Once we were done covering if statements, we moved over to creating a function that resembles a switch case, function, but conditional. You're going to have fun with these. This is how we get into making some real programs. Now, don't string so many if statements together it looks like you have a loop, because loops are going to be what comes up next. Have a good day. If you want some support, you can talk to me on Twitter, Discord, Instagram, or check us out on YouTube. Well, you might have found this video on YouTube.